Okay, for this video, I wanted to cover the IRS Form 1099-K, payment card and third-party network transaction form. And what do you need to do as a taxpayer if you receive this simply because you sold some personal items online? So you're not engaged in a trade or business, you just had some used stuff, you went on eBay, you sold it, but even still, you got a 1099-K in the mail from the company, and as you know, this is also provided to the IRS. So if you're looking at this and you're thinking, wait, how do I report this on my return if it's just personal items? Because normally these are just provided to businesses. So what we've got in front of us here is a sample 1099-K. I've also got a sample tax return that we'll go through to see how you should report these items. And then also a slide here that covers some of the background on the 1099-K and some examples and fact patterns we'll look at when we walk through this sample in the video. So just starting with the basics, what's the 1099-K? It's a payment card and third-party network transaction form that's filed by payment settlement entities. So in effect, what this means is that if you are selling stuff and you have payments being processed through a platform like eBay or PayPal, the payment settlement entity's got to provide you a 1099-K, which shows the gross amount of payment transactions processed to you as a payee during the year. Now, generally, this only needs to be provided if you have $20,000 processed and the total number of transactions exceeds 200. So in most cases, individuals never meet these thresholds unless you're actually running a business, right? So in this example here, we have John operates a business selling custom-made coffee mugs on eBay. During 2020, he sold 3,800 mugs to individual customers, totaling $30K worth of gross sales. So because he meets this $20K and 200 threshold, eBay's got to send him a 1099-K. And then a copy is also going to the IRS. So now John would report these amounts on his Schedule C, right, because he is operating a trade or business. And then he would deduct his expenses, inventory, and everything there. But where a lot of people can be trapped here is with these lower reporting thresholds. So Form 1099-K can also be filed under much lower thresholds depending on the state of residence of the payee. So let's look at an example here. Adam lives in Burlington, Vermont, and Vermont is one of these 11 states that has the lower threshold. He bought a computer for $1,200 in 2018, and then in 2020, so a couple years later, he sold it on eBay for $800 because he wanted a new one, all right? Now, Vermont lowered the 1099-K reporting threshold to $600 annually. They did this back in 2017, so they used the $600 threshold rather than the $20K and $200. So Adam's going to get a 1099-K for the $800 sale, and then a copy is going to be provided to the IRS. Now, clearly, Adam is not engaged in the business of selling computer parts or computers online. He just sold his personal computer. So he's faced with the issue of, well, the IRS has this information, now what do I need to do with it on my personal return? Okay, now the 1099-K, again, it's just reporting gross amounts of transactions. It doesn't distinguish between persons that are actively selling products or services online as a trade or business versus people like Adam that just had one-off sales for personal use items and they're not actually running a trade or business. Okay, now where it also becomes troublesome is if you receive a 1099-K and you're not reporting anything on your return, it could potentially generate a matching notice from the IRS. So matching notices are the IRS scans your tax return for information you provide, and they match it up with third-party reporting information like 1099s to see if you reported all of your gross income. Okay? Now, generally, the gain from the sale of capital assets used for personal use is a capital gain subject to tax. Okay, so let's say Adam bought this computer for what was it, the $1,200 amount, and then by some magical miracle he managed to sell it for $2,000 later. Well, he had an $800 gain on it. Believe it or not, that is taxable, right? So if you sell something for a gain, even if it's personal use, you have to report the gain on your tax return and pay tax. Now, practically, that never happens, right? As soon as you buy something, it generally depreciates almost immediately. So in this case, Adam has a loss of $400, right? He bought it for $1,200, sold it for $800, $400 loss. Now, the loss is important because if you generate a loss on the sale of personal use property, personal use capital assets, you cannot deduct the loss. So you always have to report the gain, pay tax on the gain, but if you have a loss on the sale of a personal use item, no loss deduction as a capital loss. So, it's the joys of being a U.S. taxpayer. Pay taxes on the gain, but you can't use the losses. Now, just to be clear, that's for personal use property, personal use capital assets. It doesn't apply to, obviously, if you trade stocks and bonds, other types of investments, those you can generally take capital losses, but not personal use property. Okay, so let's look at an example here for John again, and this is what we're going to look at our 1099-K and tax return for. So John, also a resident of Burlington, so in 2016 he bought a drone for $1,600, bought a new computer, $1,000, and a new camera for $400. Okay, now all of these items were for personal use. So he's not running a trader business. He's not doing photography and selling his time and services and expertise to different clients. This is all personal use property. In 2020, he needed some additional cash because he's going on vacation. So he decided to sell all these 3 items on eBay. So he sold the drone for $1,200. He got $525 out of the computer, and he sold the camera for $300. Now notice how every item he sold was at a loss, meaning his resale price on eBay was lower than what he originally paid. Okay, and that is typical, right? If you buy something and you use it, it's going to depreciate in value. You're going to sell it for a loss. So under the 1099-K reporting rules for Vermont, eBay was required to issue him a 1099-K for the 2025 in gross sale proceeds, the payment card transactions that he received from the sale of those 3 items. So he received $2,025, but his total cost basis for all of this was $3,000, right? That's what he originally paid for it. So he's got a loss here, right? He's got a loss here in the middle. So the loss, again, it's personal use. It's not deductible. But he's still thinking, well, I got a 1099-K. How do I report this? Well, like we said above, if John was engaged in a trade or business of selling these items, he would be reporting everything on his Schedule C, right? So the gross income and expenses connected with the business report on Schedule C, and that's how he report it. But in this case, again, it's personal use. There is no trade or business here because they're personal use items. So how does John report this if he was trying to avoid a notice from the IRS? Well, let's look at the 1099-K first, just so we can get our bearings here. So this is obviously not a real 1099-K, but this is effectively what the format's going to look like. You're going to get the company name up here. That was the PSE. You're going to get the name of the taxpayer, their address, and account number. And then 1A is going to be the gross amount of payment transactions for the year. So there's the 2025 that John received from selling the item. So there are 3 items sold, so 3 payment transactions, and these are the months he sold them and the amounts he realized. Okay, so now he's got this 2025 number. What does he do with it? Well, the best way to report this is on your Schedule D in Form 8949. So if we look at the 8949, we have long-term transactions here, right? So this is a long-term transaction because, again, he's held it for several years. But they're not being reported on the 1099-B. So 1099-B is the brokerage Form 1099 reporting. So it's a 1099-K, so it's not on 1099-B. And here he enters just kind of broadly what it is that he sold. So sale of equipment, that's fine. Date acquired and sold are all various, right? Because he acquired them different times during the year. And here's the sales proceeds. So the 2025, this is what matches up with your 1099-K. So this is likely going to help the IRS be able to trace the 1099-K amounts with this item here. And then he enters his cost basis of $3,000. Remember, that was the total purchase price he paid for collectively all 3 items. And then here is where he enters the adjustment for no capital loss deduction. So code L, if you look at the 8949 instructions, it's a non-deductible loss that's not a wash sale, right? So wash sales apply to certain losses for trading stocks and other securities. But in this case, we have a non-deductible loss related to something other than that. So code L works. And then the adjustment is the loss here, right? So he has a $975 loss here, but we're going to back out the loss because he's not going to be able to deduct it. So after you enter the adjustment at $975, the total amount of gain or loss as resulting from this transaction here, or this line item, is going to be 0. So this is how John gets this reporting onto his tax return. But again, if you're taking a loss on personal use items, not going to be deductible for tax purposes. However, if you took a gain, right, if this number was, let's say, $5,000 and a $3,000 basis, $2,000 in gain on personal use property is subject to taxes. So he would have a gain there. But like I said, practically speaking, that's just not going to happen. If you have personal use items, you're going to be selling them on eBay for a loss, right? You're not going to be making money on this stuff. So this is a very common fact pattern I'm seeing. What's also kind of alarming now is the IRS, or for federal tax purposes, they are changing this $20K and $200 amount starting in 2022. So, and it's being lowered, consistent kind of what we see with some of these other states like Vermont. It's going to be lowered to $600. So now more businesses and more individuals selling personal use property are going to be getting 1099Ks from the eBays, PayPals, Etsy's, all of these platforms where they're selling personal products online. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. Thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions, please leave me a comment below. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.